Hello, everyone, and welcome again to FanFuel Motorsports Podcast. This is episode 77 of the podcast where fans fuel talk about motorsports. And if you look below Nathan and I, you see a familiar face of Keith Marek. But I think we've patterned this out that if a person comes on our show more than three times, we make them a part of the family. So as you've seen in our promo for tonight, Keith Marek is now a part of the FanFuel hosting team. Welcome in.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. How does that make you feel? You happy?
Oh man, it's cool to have a dedicated podcast to jump onto. I love shooting the shit with you guys, and to be doing this on a hopefully weekly basis, depending on how the schedule falls, is it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and it's really not only a good thing for us, just because we like you, and you're one of the only Chase Elliott fans that is even tolerable. But we appreciate it because it came at the right time with me getting my new position and everything. That now, with what happened tonight with Colton, who's not on because of a work thing, and you and I having alternating schedules, and Nathan with his school stuff, we have a core group of 4 or 5 guys that are going to be able to rotate hosting the show. So it's going to live on despite life happening, which makes me really excited. Nathan, speaking of school, how's that going? Because you've been off for a couple weeks.
That's busy, man. Like usually it's whichever weeks I'm not busy, I get on here, and then whichever weeks I'm super busy, then I usually just focus on that, which it's never you can never predict it. It's sometimes it's every other week, sometimes it's no week, sometimes it's a couple weeks in a row. So it all depends. So check out our website. We'll try to get some articles out in case I can't make it here all the time. So that's what I've been doing lately.
Nathan's been putting up some pretty good articles lately. And of course, earlier in the season, we had people like Rodney Childers retweeting his articles and stuff. So obviously they're good if people in the industry are taking their time out of their day to read them. And some of us have been saying they're going to put articles out. I don't know who that is. I don't know about that, but we'll get into it. But we had the Bristol night race this weekend, triple header, and I guess actually a quadruple header because ARCA was there this week, weren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, they were.
So I didn't watch the ARCA race. Did you guys watch the ARCA race by any chance?
I wasn't able to watch the ARCA race because I was out, but I did come back for the truck race.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, well, ARCA definitely not what it used to be. I think everybody consistently says they'd rather see the mods there anyways, because that used to be the thing back in the day to see the modifieds running faster laps than the cup cars. But we did have a triple header weekend for the National Series, starting with the trucks. And first off, we had a first-time winner, and that was Ty Majeski. So what did you guys think about that?
Oh, man, it was good to see that because if you've gone back and looked at the past couple of races, he's been really close. I think IRP was a race that he pretty much had in the bag before a bunch of cautions came out. He's always been good. He just hasn't really had much of a chance to show that because if you watch the broadcast, they said that once he left Roush, he pretty much worked for ThorSport on the team before they let him drive part-time. And then once they did that, they figured he was good enough to go full-time. And it took him a while, but I think it's pretty fair to say that he's finally something went his way. That's all it really took for him to win.
Yeah. Ty Majeski, he's a really, really great late model racer. He's a great iRacing driver. He's a snowball derby champion, narrowly lost the Slinger Nats a few years ago to Matt freaking Kenseth. So he is a wheelman and a half, and it's really cool to see all that hard work pay off, especially for a team like ThorSport. ThorSport is a decorated team in NASCAR, defending champions with Ben Rhodes, 3-time champions with Matt Crafton. So I think it's a really good fit, and Bristol is right up his alley. It's a short track, high banked, high speeds, and it really, really fit into his wheelhouse. So Ty Majeski did a great job, and to see him punch his ticket into the Final Four is pretty darn cool.
Yeah, something you said about this being right up his alley, I kind of want to talk about that a little bit more in detail later with Chris Buescher winning and some of the stuff there, because it's interesting that this short track seems to have gotten so fast over the last couple of years that it doesn't even race like a short track anymore. So we'll talk a little bit greater detail with the Cup race. But I think it's interesting that you brought up, it's just something that he's used to. But he was a part of the JRM late model program. I think he also raced for maybe Roush late models when he was driving the 60 car as well. So it's very interesting to me that you would point that out. He's shown talent, but he's also like the Josh Berry of iRacing, because it's very interesting because he actually did come from iRacing, unlike William Byron and them. And so it's very interesting just to see his progression, because iRacing's been on his cars, his trucks for the whole time, and now he's got to win. So I don't know. I think I just rambled on and just did a circle and then got to no point. So I apologize for that. Yeah, sure. Congratulations, Ty Majeski. He is in the Final Four, though. So I did want to and have a lot more points regarding the truck playoffs, and we'll kind of go over the standings right now. It is mid-September, the 21st day of September, if you didn't know. I've been singing that song all day long. Ty Majeski is the first of the Final Four, and you've got guys outside right now of John Hunter Nemechek, Christian Eckes, Grant Enfinger, and Ben Rhodes. Three of those of his teammates, with Crafton being eliminated in the first round. First of all, let's talk about the guys that are under the cut line versus the guys that are above the cut line. Because when you look at the names Stuart Friesen, Zane Smith, and Chandler Smith, as well as Ty Majeski, who got the win, I think that this is a very lopsided version of the standings if you think about it from a Truck Series perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
With you too.
Yeah. So what did Bristol bring that those three guys had over the quintessential favorites, I guess, in the playoffs right now?
I'm not really sure. I feel like it's a weird playoffs for trucks because there's not really a lot of races, and there's only a couple guys that aren't going to make the next round. So I don't know whether or not the true favorites are always going to get in there, because it's always kind of a surprise because the points gaps are really small.
Yeah, the points gaps are small, and on top of that, the schedule is so wide. I started the playoffs in June, and now it is, like we said, mid-September, and we are just starting round number 2, while the NASCAR Cup Series, they started their playoffs 3 weeks ago, and they're already in round 2 heading into this week at Texas. So it is such a different dynamic going on with the Truck Series. There's a lot of time for trucks to work on their things back at the shop. A lot of time for drivers to hop into sim rigs and see how the tracks work. But it's also such very different racetracks. Like, we just raced at Bristol, and now our next race that we have on the Truck Series schedule is going to be Talladega, which that is such a hit or miss track for so many race teams. And as we've seen the last 2 seasons in the Truck Series, Spencer Boyd and Tate Fogelman were the 2 race winners of those events. Nowhere to be found in the playoffs, but that is entirely the point of Talladega, is the fact that you're going to have a lot of drivers that have never won a race or are not even in contention, that they're going to put a big sponsor on their truck and they're going to try to go balls to the wall. And that's just how this is going to work out. And then we're going to go to another half-mile short track in Martinsville. And that, we have seen it time and time and time again. I think last year we had an absolutely psychotic ending to that race.
Yeah.
So,
to say the least.
Yeah. So it is going to be intense the next 2 weeks. And so I know the Ty Majeski has his feet up, man. He's going to go to Phoenix and he's going to be all right. These next 2 weeks for, 7 drivers, it's going to be difficult. And a lot of these drivers, they are successful this season. Zane Smith, Chandler Smith, John Hunter Nemechek. That's just 3 drivers that have been exceptionally good. On top of all this, you also have 2 KBM drivers that are in there that Kyle Busch Motorsports hasn't won a title since Christopher Bell. And they were known for just being at the top of their game at all times. And so to have 2 drivers that really want to be chomping at the bit, to have to go through Talladega first is going to be intense for sure.
Yeah. So you bring up the spacing kind of the schedule for the truck series. We talked about this right before we got on the show. So Nathan, I'm going to ask you this question. Keith said the next 2 weeks. Well, they're not 2 weeks from now. It's 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from each of these rounds, and it's been like that since the middle of June. I think they started on June 23rd. And we've just now gotten through the fourth race, the first of the second round. So as someone who's not really been paying attention that much this year to the truck series, because it really was a shit show last year, and I just kind of was like, I don't care, because we had Knoxville, because we had Martinsville, we had more and more of these shit shows. I didn't really pay attention to it this year. Do you think, Nathan, that the hype for the truck series playoffs is non-existent, and do we even need it? Because you're talking about June, July, August, September, October, November, 5 months for 7 races to crown a champion.
I don't agree with it for once, because I feel like they only gave trucks playoffs just to make it uniform with everything else. I feel like the last couple of years have kind of proven we don't really need it, because I don't see the point of doing this if we're just going to have races that are, 3 weeks apart, and, so let's say there's like however many guys, and you're only taking 2 of them out every time. So it's like that almost makes you wonder why there's even multiple rounds. It just seems kind of so much different than the other series playoffs that you almost can't compare it.
Yeah, and you're talking about 7 races out of 23 versus 7 out of 35 for the Xfinity Series and 10 out of 36 for the Cup Series. So I guess, Keith, I'll ask you, how would you fix it? Because I, too, just disagree with the fact that they even need to have 7 races over the span of 5 months to determine the champion.
So I think we actually have our timeline wrong, believe it or not. The regular season ended at Pocono, which was the second to last week of July. So even still, it doesn't change the fact that we've been in the playoffs. We had 3 races, now 4 races through just a touch over a month and a half now, going on 2 months. That is way too much of a timeline there. If I were to fix it, there's 2 options that you got. Your one option, completely get rid of it. I don't see a need for it. I think that it promotes way too much chaos and recklessness, and that's exactly why this series has lost a lot of its merit. Me and a buddy of mine, we've been talking for a long time about the truck series. It used to be washed out Cup drivers that dropped down to the truck series. And you also, yes, and they put on fantastic shows. And you also had drivers who were up and coming, and you also had drivers who were just kind of there. You had your truck lifers. Now, this is just your baseball version of a farm system. They just see how well can you do. Not really all that great, because you're just beating the shit out of the next guy next to you. It's not that entertaining for a diehard fan like us. For some people, they want to go and see a demo derby, and that's exactly what you're going to get, especially with these playoffs.
Yeah.
You have tracks like IRP, you have tracks like Bristol, you have tracks like Martinsville, Talladega. If you want to have excitement and chaos, pandemonium, everything in between, this is the place for you. But I don't think the Truck Series needs it. When they placed the playoffs in the Xfinity Series and Truck Series in 2016, I was like, I liked it in the Cup Series only. I don't think that the lower series needed it. However, we are in this position, and we are fully aware of the position that we're in. The tracks that we have coming up for the Cup Series, we just finished up Darlington. We just finished up at Kansas. We just finished up at Bristol. 3 tracks that the Truck Series have put on great races at in the past. Yep. And so I don't see any reason why we couldn't have gone and picked a handful of races from this first round of the Cup Series and made it into the Truck Series. Because as much as I would love to have the Truck Series go back to its old short track racing roots, and you have your beating and banging kind of short tracks, it's gotten to the point where we're at bigger race tracks with bigger markets at them. And so I really think that if you want to do the playoff thing, you need to kind of run all your races regular season up until about where the Cup Series starts their playoffs. Because if nobody said anything, I would not have known that Ty Majeski won the race at Bristol and was going to Phoenix. Had not a care in the world about it because there's no excitement. There's no intensity. It's lost all of its excitement and it sucks.
Yeah, and I think you are right. I'm looking at the schedule right now. It was July, so that's still 4 months for
It's a lot.
7 races. I think for me, you talk about some of these races that could have been. I think the easiest thing would be to trim some fat from the front end of the schedule, not have these big gaps. At different parts of the summer. I think realistically, if they're going to have a big gap, race at Daytona and then pretty much race every week from the summer through the playoffs. I'm looking at the Cup playoffs for the last 7 rounds, and the Xfinity Series playoffs are these 7 rounds, obviously. We start with Texas, go to Talladega, Charlotte, then we go to Vegas, Homestead, Martinsville, and Phoenix. All right, so we don't necessarily need to have 2 wild card rounds in the Truck Series playoffs, right? So that will be the Talladega and the Roval. I don't think that should be honestly there for Xfinity, and we're not going to see Xfinity at Talladega next year. So I think the perfect way to fix this would be to have both series start at the Bristol night race for their first round of the playoffs, go to Texas, and each one of them have an off week while the other one races at Talladega and Roval, and then 2 very good tracks for racing the trucks at Vegas, Homestead, Martinsville. And that condenses it to all be pretty much the same schedule, all 3 series. I mean, do we think that fixes the hype? Because, I mean, we're talking last week of July, and I don't know.
I think that where the Truck Series stands right now, they have gone on 3+ week stints of vacation, and it has been a norm for whatever reason. I think with the Truck Series, especially with the Truck Series, you can't have 36 races. The funding's not there, the drivers aren't there, sponsorship's not there. So it's good to have a 23 race season. That's not a problem. However, I think the most spacing that there should be in between each race should be 2 weeks tops, and that's it, because you're going to lose a lot of that excitement. Say like we just finished up Bristol. The next 2 weeks, the Cup Series has Texas and they have Talladega. And I think if you're the Truck Series, if you just raced at Bristol, you take off, Texas and Talladega and you go to the Roval at most. But even that's still too much of a gap in between to keep someone engaged, to keep fans engaged, to keep sponsors wanting to be there. Because let me tell you something right now. I don't know if sponsors really want to jump into a series that has so much gap in it. And I don't even know what the ratings were for Bristol for the Truck Series race. I have no idea what it was. But it couldn't have been great because it's one of the most forgettable schedules right now.
You don't know when it's racing, and that's the biggest problem.
Yes.
But we do know who is racing and who always has good racing, and that's the Xfinity Series. So we look at Friday night's Xfinity Series race, and we'll start off with the biggest, I guess, news going into the playoffs, and that is Noah Gragson has just won 3 races in a row. So we'll start with Nathan. Where are you at on Noah Gragson as a driver? And how do you feel for him getting, 6 wins this year?
I mean, first of all, I'm not surprised because I feel like he's had enough time now. It's been, 5 years in Xfinity, which is, by modern standards, that's a really, really long time in Xfinity. And he's had, I think, most of the guys that he was competing with when he started out are gone. So I kind of expected it was kind of like, Chase Briscoe when all the other guys left. When they leave, he's the guy that wins all the races. And now that all those guys left, he's the one that's winning all the races. So I'm not surprised. I think that he's got a good future ahead of him, but I don't want to get too much on the hype train for the Cup side yet because I feel like there's a lot more that's still yet to be proven.
Absolutely. Noah Gragson, he's been knocking on the door. First career win came in 2020, and since then he's just lit it up. And this season especially, he's done a fantastic job. But it has not gone without making some enemies. And one of the biggest enemies he's got right now is the guy that is arguably his biggest rival for the championship, and that is Ty Gibbs. And we've seen time and time and time again that number 54 Monster Energy Toyota has absolutely zero problem putting a driver in the wall.
Absolutely.
And Noah Gragson, he has absolutely pissed people off doing what he did at Road America. That just goes to show you where his headspace can be at. And so I think that he's really pissed off Ty Gibbs for the last time. Ty Gibbs had his Kyle Busch everything is great interview saying thank you so much to the team. We've worked on it, done a great job. Can't wait for next week. And he would not answer anything about the question because he's doing the whole PR thing. But I know for a fact that Ty Gibbs is pissed. And now we are going to be heading into a string of races in which there is going to be some close quarters. Roval is going to be a really, really big one. Martinsville coming up. And we've seen it time and time again that Ty Gibbs doesn't have much of a problem doing it anywhere. We did it to Ryan Sieg earlier this year at Las Vegas. Like, he's got no issue getting up under somebody and moving you out of the way to let you know he's not all that happy with you. So Noah Gragson absolutely has been class of the field, 3 consecutive wins, most wins for a JRM driver in one season. He's done a fantastic job, but he has kind of Ross Chastained himself to a degree. Yeah. And he's really put himself into a hole with some drivers that don't really have much to lose and have no issue taking care of business if they have to.
Yeah, so I think we all can probably agree that the 2 favorites are the 54 and the 9. However, I want to ask you this. We're going to Talladega and the Roval. So Texas is really the only racetrack in this round of 12 that these guys can, I guess, sit tight, hold the wheel, and know that it's pretty much going to be straightforward. If Noah and Ty get into something, what's stopping one or the other from being just the dominant favorite they're from? Because, potentially you could have 2 bad races in the back end of this round just based off of the racetracks that we're at. So what's stopping Ty Gibbs from just making the 9's race at Texas hell and just walking right to Phoenix because he doesn't have to worry about anybody else in the round of 8?
Oh man, it's tough. I don't think you're going to see anything like that until it's actually time, because those guys know that they have they can't control everything, but if they can control what they can control and they don't have any bad luck, then it's pretty much a shoo-in Final Four for both of them. And I think that they're going to realize that now is not the time to be making enemies or doing stuff like that, because I guarantee you they're going to wreck each other in the final race if they're both there. That's what I feel like is going to happen. But before then, I'm not really sure. I think, if anything, it would be a Martinsville.
Okay.
So we're heading into Texas, and Texas is a track that I don't think the Xfinity Series has raced at. Oh, yes, they have. They raced at it earlier this year, I guess, with the All-Star Weekend. Ty Gibbs, he went and he finished 12th there, but he also has won in a mile and a half this year, and that was at Las Vegas. And I don't see much of an issue with Ty Gibbs just going and straight out winning at Texas. He's got fast race cars. He's super, super strong. And I think that he absolutely does have the opportunity to just win, punch his ticket, and get into the next round. Talladega is going to be a crapshoot race, which Noah Gragson is one of the best plate racers in the sport right now. We've seen it time and time again. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to get around a racetrack really well. And so that's going to be a hard track for Ty Gibbs to really dictate. But when it comes to the Roval, I really don't think that there's much withstanding in between Ty Gibbs and Noah Gragson having an issue together. That has been a close quarters, slow racetrack ever since its inception. And we've seen payback happen time and time again. Kevin Harvick last season with Chase Elliott just got him coming back up onto the oval portion. And it is that quick. It's that easy. And so if Ty Gibbs can punch his way in and Gregson hasn't done it by the time the Roval comes around, I can absolutely see Ty Gibbs making the Roval hell for Noah Gregson for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's see with the second round with 2 mile-and-a-halfs and Martinsville, I just think it is going to be convenient for whoever decides to race the hardest at potentially Texas, because if I'm looking at these Xfinity Series playoffs, I don't count on doing good at Talladega or the Roval, just based on just the wild card aspect of it. And there's a third player in all of this that drives for the probably best restrictor plate team in the Xfinity Series, and also, is the best road racer in the whole top 3 series of NASCAR. And he's just won his second regular season championship in a row, and that is AJ Allmendinger. And I think that you have to know that he's probably going to be a threat to win at both Talladega and the Roval. He's probably going to walk away with the Roval. So if I'm the 9 or the 54, I think I can take the other one out, be laps down at Texas, and not have to worry about them making it into the next round. That's just where I'm at. Now that just might be false for me, but it is what I think could happen if I'm one of those guys, because I feel like they race that hard,
Absolutely.
So other than that, let's get into since they are starting the Xfinity Series playoffs, let's get into who's in and who's out. So firstly, Ryan Sieg makes it in, Riley Herbst makes it in, Daniel Hemrick and Sam Mayer make it in. They are all below the cut line before we've raced our first race. So those guys have made it in. We have Brandon Jones, Austin Hill, Josh Berry, Allmendinger, Allgaier, Gibbs, Gregson, and then, of course, Jeremy Clements, who was in, not in, and back in because we didn't know until he went to the R&D Center whether or not he would win the appeal for winning the race in Daytona. So it's a pretty decent field, but there seems to be one person missing, and I know you wanted to talk about this, Keith. So who is that person that seems to be missing from the playoff field?
Oh man, I'm drawing a fucking blank right now. Hardcore blank. You got to help me. Hardcore.
He's a teammate of Austin.
Never mind. I got it. And that is Sheldon Creed. Darlington was a fantastic race for Sheldon Creed, and he went toe-to-toe with one of the sport's best drivers, and that was Kyle Larson. Larson went into turn 1 on the final lap, and he and Creed got into the wall and allowed Noah Gragson to get his first of 3 consecutive race wins. Sheldon Creed got out of the car and he was all smiles. He was, that was good racing. But it's hard to sit back and think that maybe there was an opportunity for him to just punch his ticket in and go into Bristol and not have to worry about everything. But he goes into Bristol and getting a race win. He's side by side with Ty Gibbs for the race lead, and Noah Gragson drives it on into the turn, gives the boot to Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs and Sheldon Creed both wreck, and there goes Sheldon Creed's opportunity to get in. And Creed has shown for the last few weeks he is right on top of it. He's been really, really fast, finally. He's had a lot of down moments this season. He hasn't been that quick in a lot of instances, while his teammate Austin Hill is a 2-time winner on the season, winning at both Daytona and Atlanta, and nearly won the second Daytona race as well. So, Austin Hill is having a fantastic season, while Sheldon Creed hasn't really been at the same level, and it's been frustrating, I'm sure. But Darlington was a racetrack that Sheldon Creed has won in the past at the Truck Series level. And he had a fantastic opportunity to get it done. And Bristol is a racetrack that he also has some great runs at as well. So it's kind of a bummer to see that number 2 car not be a part of the playoffs, considering he is a Truck Series champion from 2 seasons ago. He is more than worthy of the opportunity to be here. And it just sucks to see what ended up happening.
Yeah, I would have to agree because I feel like Sheldon Creed was under a lot of pressure at the start of this year because he had a lot of hype coming into Xfinity, and of course the first couple months of the year were kind of rough for him. A lot of DNFs, a lot of crashes, and he finally started to show that speed toward the end of the year, but it was just too little, too late. And
Yeah.
Darlington was just one of those deals. But at Bristol, I mean, there was nothing he could have done. I mean, he just got taken out as an innocent bystander.
Yeah.
So up until this point, we've had 5 plate tracks with 2 at Atlanta, 2 at Daytona, 1 at Talladega. And Austin Hill has won 2 of those. I was sitting here like while you guys were talking, thinking about how Sheldon Creed, he's a rookie, so maybe it's just growing pains. But then again, Austin Hill is a rookie as well, and he's not really had the same kind of growing pains when it comes to getting a win and concealing that ticket into the playoffs. Has it just been the bad luck of the last few weeks, or has Austin Hill just been elevated because he won 2 plate tracks and hasn't really been that much of a name on a regular, mile and a half week to week basis?
Oh man, that's tough. I feel like it's almost becoming sort of a weird hierarchy structure in Xfinity to where on the mile and a halfs, I mean, it's JRM, it's Ty Gibbs, and then it's everybody else. So I feel like he's probably capable of running, let's just say all 4 or 5 JRM cars and Ty Gibbs are in the top 6. He's probably capable of running right behind those guys. It's just a matter of can the other teams close the gap to JRM or Gibbs in these past couple weeks, because if they can't, then they're going to get pulled away from pretty quickly. And I think he's capable of doing it. It's just a matter of whether or not RCR is close enough to those top 2 teams to do anything.
Yeah. So I'm looking at all the stats right now, and between the 2 teammates, Austin Hill, out of the 26 events this year, has a top 10 in 16 races.
Oh, wow.
So
That's pretty
he's
good.
been pretty consistent. Meanwhile, Sheldon Creed, out of the 26, has 10. And in that same stroke, he has 135 laps led. And when you go and you look at his teammate, he has done far better than that this year. He went out and he led 23 laps en route to his Daytona win. He led 27 laps in his runner-up finish at Atlanta, led 67 at Talladega, 73 at his Atlanta win. He's been right on top of it. He's been super, super fast, and he has finished just about every race. I believe he's got 99% laps completed. Meanwhile, Sheldon Creed hasn't had that same luck. So I really do believe that it comes down to the fact that Austin Hill has just been more consistent. 2 DNFs for Austin Hill, but they were both late race crashes. Sheldon Creed just hasn't had the luck, but he also just hasn't had the speed. And, I know that the Xfinity Series is such a topsy-turvy series that, you'll see just about anybody jump in there and be able to make some noise. I can think about 10 different drivers right off the top of my head right now that can win any given race weekend. And Sheldon Creed, I don't have in that top 10. And it's not because of lack of talent. It's just because he and his team are not where they need to be. Meanwhile, that 21 car is.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they're both basically in the same situation, coming straight out of the Truck Series. And if you'd have asked me this the first part of the season, I would have told you that Sheldon Creed was the shoe-in for of those 2 to do better this year in Xfinity, and I would have been massively wrong, especially listening to the stats. So one last thing before we move on to the Cup Series, who are you guys early top 4? I mean, I think we're both of the top 2 are Ty Gibbs and Noah Gragson are shoe-ins for the 3 of us. But who are those other 2 drivers that you're looking at for the Final 4?
I think, honestly, it's hard to not pick AJ Allmendinger because he's always a presence. I think that his is a pretty good example of Kaulig has not been where they need to be compared to JRM or JGR, because I think JRM and Ty Gibbs have literally won like every single stage on an oval track for the past like 6 months. Every stage. So those guys are obviously in another category of their own, but I think AJ Allmendinger will definitely get there off of consistency alone. I think obviously the 9 and the 54, they're going to win their way in. They'll probably win what feels like half the playoff races. And I think Justin Allgaier is probably the fourth guy I would pick because he's pretty much in the Final Four almost every year at this point. So I don't really see a reason to not pick him again.
So Gibbs and Gregson, they're going to be shoo-ins for me. But I'm going to give you guys some stats on AJ Allmendinger. So 3 wins this season through 26 events. He has an average finish of 6.4, and he has 23 top 10 finishes with 0 DNFs.
Damn.
Unbelievable stats. And on top of that, given where he is point standing wise, winning the regular season title, Noah Gragson has 6 wins, and that equates to 30 bonus points. AJ Allmendinger has 3 wins, and with that 15-point bonus, he also is at 30 bonus points. So even without having the same amount of wins, he still has the same amount of points as Noah Gragson. He's been the most consistent driver. His average start is worse than his average finish, and that's fucking wild. Wild. He has been super, super, super consistent. He's been at the front of the field. He's got a great average finish, and you have a couple races that are coming up that are going to be really, really good for him. You got Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is a racetrack that he has had really good success at in terms of being able to run well. He also won there in 2021, so he is a former Las Vegas race winner. You also got Martinsville. Martinsville races a lot like a road course. You know, you go down in deep, you got tight turns, slow corners. I think that he is going to be, I don't say a shoo-in, but I will say he is most likely going to be the third guy. And I'm going to go a little off the beaten path here for number 4. I'm going to say Brandon Jones is going to jump in to the Final Four, and he is going to have a really good shot at winning the title because guess who won at Phoenix? And you know, Phoenix is a really, he's won at Phoenix before. I know he beat Kyle Busch straight up. Like, went up there, passed him, took the race lead, and took the race win. So he is a former Phoenix race winner. Martinsville is also a great track for him. I believe he won earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken, but Brandon Jones is a very quiet sleeper. And there's no surprise to why Junior Motorsports selected him to be their new driver of the number 9 car.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's going to be one of those guys that is an Xfinity lifer, kind of like the Matt Crafton of the world, the Johnny Sauters of the world in the Truck Series. I don't see him getting to the Final Four, though. Maybe next year when we lose Ty Gibbs and Noah Gragson, but not this year. I think you guys hit the nail on the head with AJ Allmendinger. I think he is a shoo-in. I think that he can easily win the Roval. I think that he can easily win Las Vegas. But what it comes down to, in my opinion, is who wins at Talladega and who wins at Homestead. Not Homestead, Martinsville, my bad. I think that Talladega, being that Jeremy Clements is in, knowing that Austin Hill is very good, and knowing that Daniel Hemrick drives for Colleague, you've got guys that could go up there and play a spoiler for a top 8 spot. Of course, Austin Hill is probably a shoo-in for the round of 8. But, you know, if it's not him and it is a Jeremy Clements or it is a Daniel Hemrick, which are very viable options, that could knock one of these other guys out. And I think that could change the scope of who's in the Final Four. But when I look at Martinsville, and you know what, really even Homestead, the car that sticks out to me is another JRM car, but it's not Allgaier. It's Josh Berry. I think that he's the guy that's going to be the final, the 4th spot in the Final Four, just based off a win at either or both of those racetracks.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh Berry's been really, really consistent in terms of being fast at mile and a halves, and he's also a former winner in Martinsville, won his first career event there. So he is a good short track racer. He was a short track driver for a long time, and that's a great opportunity for him. Also, when you look at Talladega, he's not been great at the plate races, but he's been listening to Dale Earnhardt Jr. a little bit. And he actually had a pretty solid outing at Daytona this year, which was nice to see as a Josh Berry fan myself, to see him be able to run pretty well and keep his nose clean just about all afternoon long. He found himself finishing, where are you, sir? I know you're around here somewhere. Come on. I can't find him. I know he finished. I know he was in the race. Anyway, he ran pretty well. He kept his nose clean, and he didn't get in any trouble. And when it comes down to it, sometimes you don't have to be fast. You just have to finish the damn race.
Spring race with Ross Chastain winning. That's quintessentially what you just said.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, just be there at the end. Now, he finished 18th. And, he led 6 laps. So, he figured something out. I believe that Josh Berry has the talent and the capacity to be able to run well and to have an opportunity to punch himself into the Final Four for sure.
All right. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the Cup Series, the Bristol Night Race, the 4th crown jewel, as it were, since we don't have the Brickyard anymore. Kind of moved into its spot. Very anticipated race. However, this would be the first time the next-gen cars took charge to the fastest half mile. And we kind of didn't know what was going to happen, but we could only assume what was going to happen based on the quote-unquote short tracks earlier this year with Richmond and Martinsville. And as someone who enjoyed both Richmond races, thought they were pretty good, I'm going to defer this to Nathan because Nathan had a little bit different opinion of Saturday night's race than I did. So I'll let him go first.
Well, first of all, as a disclaimer, I'm not going to say it wasn't entertaining. The events that took place during the race were very entertaining. But I think the racing itself, I mean, there were quite a bit of drivers who were pretty critical of what happened on the track. And I think there was one pass for the lead under green flag conditions. And that was Keselowski with about 100 laps to go. But other than that, it was just, I think Hamlin said you go faster in the corner than you do in the straightaway. So as we all know at this point, that never, ever leads to good things on short tracks. Yeah. So I think Harvick was another one that said, the tires, they never fall off, so there's no wear. So it's pretty much all about track position. I mean, Chris Buescher was the only car to take 2 tires, and he ended up winning the race, which it almost makes me wonder why more people didn't take 2 tires, because if they knew track position was going to matter that much, why are you taking 4 tires?
Well, I mean, that could probably be something to do with just stage racing has eliminated any sort of tire strategy at all, in my opinion. But the first thing that you noted that there was only one pass for the lead. And this is something that pissed me off when I was talking to people on Twitter about the race, is that they said the race wasn't good because there was no lead changes.
I'm not saying that.
I'm not. I'm calling out other people. I don't understand how people can look at a singular metric as saying that the race was not good. Yes, events happened attrition-wise that we don't normally see that could be frustrating to some, could be entertaining to others. I thought that provided some good race strategy. Not really strategy, but, race-altering events. However, I feel like when we're not watching the leader at Bristol on Saturday night, we saw some of the best racing, if not the best racing we've seen on short tracks all year.
Ooh, that's tough for me because I feel like, watching
there was passing all over.
I mean, I was watching the ticker and there was not a lot that went on behind the leader, at least compared to a normal Bristol race. It's just, I think there's the disclaimer that I was going to say is that it's passing because one car is better than everybody else is one thing. Passing because the package doesn't allow you to pass is a totally different thing. That's kind of what Saturday was. Wherever you would cycle out, you'd kind of just stay there, with the exception of Christopher Bell. He passed, I think, 1 or 2 cars after he blew a tire. And I think Hamlin might have passed, I think he passed 1 car after he blew his tire. And then all of the other positions were kind of just inherited after people blew tires or people crashed in front of him. So I'm a little bit worried for this car in terms of Martinsville again. It's just, you know, it's it's almost a challenge because everything that was designed in this car is the opposite of what makes good short track racing. So I think
But
maybe with hindsight,
it's frustrating to me because it did everything it was supposed to do for big track racing. Because
yeah,
it's been beautiful on big tracks.
I think that's your main issue. Like they kind of went in such a radical direction to where it's really good for one and really bad for the other because it's so different. You know,
So Keith, as the third person here, I'm going to let you decide whether or not for FanFuel Motorsports if this was a good race or not. Because I thought it was a really good race. I thought there was good racing.
So I'm not going to say it was a really good race, but I'm not going to say it was a bad race. This raced a lot like 2013 Bristol, where drivers migrated up to the top of the racetrack, and you'd see drivers try to dive down to the bottom, get side by side, and try to make a move. And it was really difficult for that driver on the bottom to fight that momentum that was up on the top of the racetrack. However, when it did work out, when you had a faster car that ran to the bottom, you give them a couple laps, they finally figured out a way to get by. Saw Chase Elliott do it a couple times. Saw Brad Keselowski do it a couple of times. Drivers that were quick, they managed to get by. However, drivers that really even, that outside lane was going to be premier, no matter what. And I think that at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to the tire. The tire was a different tire than we've had. And all weekend long, you had issues with the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, and, of course, the Cup Series. And the tire issue I know we'll get to later. But that was it was a good race. I think, was it the best Bristol night race? No. I have
Absolutely
seen
not.
better. I have seen
yeah, I
much
think
better
I'd probably
racing.
put it like bottom of the decade probably since 2010. Which is, I mean,
And
obviously that says a lot about Bristol night races because there really hasn't. This is like the only one that you could consider not a
Yeah.
classic, I guess.
And so I think that's a big problem with fans is
I'm not saying it's bad because it's not a
they
classic. You know, like
I
don't get
too,
me wrong.
but that's what happens though. I think in
Yeah, well, I'm
general,
not them.
fans put these races on these pedestals, right? And when they want 100%, 500 laps, 500 miles of action, 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 and they don't get it, they don't
Right.
appreciate
I'm
it,
not.
even if it is good. And
Right. I'm
Saturday
not.
night to me was entertaining all night.
I mean, that's fair, but I think that my perspective is not the same as theirs, so don't lump me in with them. I'm just saying that the package was pretty. Just, I'm not going to say it was miserable, but from a actual racing standpoint, like if you take away all the crashes and all the blown tires, then there really wasn't a lot of substance. You know, there was just wherever you would cycle out, you would kind of just stay unless you were at the back. But I think it's just a matter of this car needs to get fixed on these bigger tracks because you got a diffuser, which sucks the car to the ground. You've got bigger tires, smaller sidewall, so you have to build a harder tire because you really can't build a tire that's softer with this. And then you've got to do high cornering speeds and low horsepower. So you can't spin the rear tires. So that's another big thing of why Martinsville's having problems because how are you going to, how is a driver going to play a role in the rear tire management if you can't even wear the rear tires out?
Right.
You know, I'm hoping yeah.
They know that that's a problem, right? And so this is another thing that I said on Twitter is like people's got to be patient. And I called Denny Hamlin out in his little thing by retweeting and said, no, you just need to be patient. I mean, because we spent nearly a decade getting the Gen 6 package to even be entertaining at the plate tracks, you know. The COT was not very good on intermediates until they put the spoiler on. You know, like that kind of stuff. Like it's going to take some time, but the fact is they should have made changes for the playoffs because we know after these flat tracks and these short tracks what the problem was on these shorter tracks. Why didn't they make those changes? And that's, I think, the biggest problem of what we got not being what we expected.
So
right, and I feel bad.
I think. Sorry to cut you off, Nathan.
Oh no, go ahead.
I think that it's a good thing they didn't make these changes. I think that we're revisiting these racetracks. If you're just going to switch up the rules package and say, all right, we're changing this right now, And it's like, all right, the sport's going to change and everything, especially now we're going into the playoffs. Now these teams have finally started to build notebooks on how some of these racetracks are operating. And, we're going to go to Talladega for the second time this season. That's going to be, a revisit. We're going back to Vegas for a second time, Martinsville for a second time. So if you're going to go ahead and change everything and try to make it more entertaining, you are taking away the merit of having to go to 2 races a season. Why not just make it 1 race a season? Because, you want to keep that legitimacy there. And I think changing up how the races are going to operate, it makes a very topsy-turvy format that we have already even more illegitimate.
So it's a good thing you bring that
pretty
up.
fair.
I mean, I'll ask you, I'm assuming that you'd be okay with them doing it over the offseason since they did take the test at Martinsville. They didn't have underbody aero for the tire test at Martinsville a couple of weeks ago. I'm assuming that you're okay with that happening over the offseason. But also, with the point that you just said, I wanted to talk about this first round as far as parts, because we had obviously a lot of stuff happening at Bristol, but we had what happened to Kevin Harvick at Darlington as well. So with what you said about the topsy-turviness of the playoffs, how do you feel that we've had all these issues? Before we get into the specifics of the issues, which we'll talk about next, how do you feel that it seems like the first 4 out may have been affected by just the next-gen car not being where we think it should be?
Yeah, absolutely. This is coming from one central place, all these parts, all these cars, the chassis, that's where it's coming from. And so, you'll look at the director of competition, say, these NASCAR teams, they went and they agreed to all of these things. And, they try to put some responsibility on the NASCAR teams. But when I sit back and I think about it, it's like, well, you kind of gave them no choice. You said, all right, pick a part. And it's like, well, I want to make my own parts. Well, you got to pick a part. I never chose to pick a part. If I had a choice, that wasn't going to be it. So I think with everything, NASCAR is listening. They are watching, and they know that there are things that they need to make some adjustments on. And, the attrition that we've seen this first round has been more than I think anybody anticipated.
Yeah, I will say that the one thing that really bothered me with NASCAR is that in hindsight, they should have expected this, or we should have expected this, because, bigger brakes, better tires, better underbody aero, that stuff, and less horsepower, that stuff doesn't lead to good short track racing. And I feel like if I had paid more attention to what the package was going to be, we probably should have seen it coming. And I do remember talking to somebody about, I think it was December of the offseason, who said that these short tracks are going to be bad. He told me, he's like, straight up, these aren't going to be good races because this is what the car looks like. And I was like, well, I don't know that yet. And, you fast forward it a calendar year and he ends up being mostly correct. So
Yeah.
I'm surprised that the engineers or whoever, the drivers, didn't see these characteristics in the car, and I'm surprised they didn't be a little bit more proactive with it, because if they knew that these characteristics were all difficult to fix, then, it makes you wonder why we went ahead with it anyways, and now we have to go all the way back.
So I think NASCAR is going to NASCAR, but I also don't think that this is a problem that we didn't address. Talk to Denny Hamlin, talk to Kyle Busch, talk to Martin Truex Jr., talk to Brad Keselowski, talk to Kevin Harvick. Any of those guys would have told you what was going to be wrong at every one of these tracks every bit of this year and what was going to be right. And we saw most of the stuff happen that those 7 drivers said was going to happen. Those guys have been in the sport. Those guys drive race cars, and those guys love putting on entertaining races for us. And that's why we've got them advocating for stuff like practice, advocating for more horsepower, advocating for smaller gears, or I guess bigger gears. I don't know. Advocating for, tire fall, all this stuff. But the people in charge who are paying money to do this, the CEOs or the car owners at this point, I think they have too much say in what NASCAR is putting on the product, because they're whining about money, and the more changes, the more packages we take to each track, the less it's going to work. But we know from the past few years, 750 worked at the short tracks. It would have worked at the big track, but they didn't do that. But now the 670 is working at the big track. Well, why don't we have the 750 package at the Southern? Why are we spending money for 6 races a year to have a different package than the rest of them, and not spending for 6 more races a year at these short tracks and these flat tracks to have good racing? At the end of the day, you're going to be making less money if you have less fans in the stands because your races are shit. And I think that the guys that own these race cars are the ones that are the problem. And until the old head mentality gets out and the Trackhouse 2311 and RFK guys have a seat at the big boys table and not the kids table, we're not going to see many of these changes happen.
Yeah, I think I would have to
absolutely.
agree. I think what Alex said nailed it. You know, when it comes to TV, that's where all the money is. And if the TV is taking all the money and the sport's taking all the money, there's not really much money for the teams left. So they're almost forced to act like that out of necessity because they have to survive.
Right.
You know, like they don't really have the money to do the things that we want them to do because they're not getting it.
And are you gonna force yourself to lose more money to make the sport more money or make yourself more money? So I can see the points where it's coming from. It's just right now it's a money problem in the sport, and we're the ones that are taking the hit. I think.
Yeah,
that's the biggest.
There's no doubt.
Now about parts overall, I'm gonna go with Keith first, and then we'll go with Nathan for the second part. So Keith, we're gonna talk about Kyle Busch. You sent in your messages in our group chat earlier today some stuff that you've seen, and I wanted you to go ahead and kind of break down the round of 16 for Kyle Busch and what happened at Darlington and what happened at Bristol, and then we'll put our aluminum tinfoil hats on and see what happens.
So at Darlington, Kyle Busch late in the race, leading the event, caution comes out. Under caution, his engine blows. It expires. Denny Hamlin, if I recall, said that he heard Kyle Busch miss a shift. And David Wilson went and he confirmed it, that when Kyle Busch, about a lap and a half prior to his engine expiring, when he was shifting from 4th to 5th, he missed that shift and he absolutely pegged the rev limiter. And so an issue that has been happening with the engines is not necessarily an issue, but what NASCAR has mandated is the rev limiter and where it's supposed to be at. It was at 9,700 RPM. Now it's about 9,200 RPM. And so where the engines usually kind of hit at peak speeds for Toyota are about 8,500. But if you're going to hit that rev limiter, you're going above 9,200. And so he pegged it, he nailed it, and within a lap and a half, his engine expired. Now, when it came to Bristol, once again, they're still learning how this thing is working, especially with a lot of NASCAR's mandates and how they want to operate with all of the engines. 8,500 RPM was where they're kind of trending around, and their valve train had an issue, and they ended up hitting that rev limiter a lot more than they wanted to for an excessive amount of time. And so when Kyle Busch was running at Bristol, high speeds and very high corner speeds. So there wasn't a lot of time for the engine to kind of cool down. You kind of get down into the corner, you let the car sit down, and then you're already mashing the gas middle of the corner, and you're hitting some super high speeds down the straightaways, short track wise at least. So he's hitting some super high speeds, and he's hitting that NASCAR mandated rev limiter, and the valve train could not handle it. And it was a bummer for the second time in 3 weeks. David Wilson said that he feels absolutely remorseful over the fact that they cost Kyle Busch, a championship, or at least a shot at it. Darlington, I have to say, is more on Kyle Busch than anything, but Bristol was a rough one.
So are you going to put your tinfoil hat on, or is it sitting to your side still?
Oh man, it's over here somewhere. It's definitely
Yeah.
over here. If I'm Toyota, I'm not gonna be that spiteful dick that's gonna try to make Kyle Busch's life live in hell. If you can win a championship, damn it, with the best driver in the sport,
Yeah.
you better go and take the
Right.
opportunity for it for the last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Well,
agree. I don't think it's fair to tinfoil hat this. I think that I understand the frustration from Kyle Busch fans, but I just think that this has got to be the most illogical tinfoil hat thing that I've ever seen NASCAR fans do.
yeah.
Like, I've never seen so many people just willingly believe what they want to believe, even though the evidence is right there in front of them. They're just going their own way, and
It doesn't matter.
this is no disrespect to the people on Twitter, but it's just
Yeah.
if you look at the engines. I know that someone told me like it's impossible to miss an upshift because of sequential, which I get it, but that doesn't mean you can't damage the engine. You're not going to miss the shift physically, but if you're bad with the revs, then yeah, you're going to damage the engine.
Yeah.
And
And it's all about
Hamlin,
timing too.
Hamlin,
Like,
and Hamlin was the opposite. He straight up blew his engine because leaving the pits at Vegas, he was going from third to fourth, or not third to fourth. I think he was going from second to third. So he
so he
went
tried
up.
to go up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he just downshifted, blew the engine, spun out, and locked the rear tires. But
Yeah.
I think people are telling me like, well, clearly then Toyota sabotaged him because you can't miss an upshift. I'm like, well, you can still damage it. You can still
Yeah.
damage the
So
engine.
it's all about timing with these sequential things.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're using the clutch at these restarts or not. I
don't
doubt
think
that
they
they
do.
are. But if you over rev, like if you don't have the timing right with your foot and your lever, you can bounce off that rev limiter and kind of hear that instead of putting it into gear. Like it has to be.
Oh yeah.
It has to be off throttle at the exact moment you
Yep, you got
push.
to go off
And
up.
with a guy that restarts as good as Kyle Busch does, he's probably going faster than the gearbox can at that point. So
Yeah,
that's
it makes
something that you have to
wonder.
think about.
Like, I also want to say though that I knew that when that happened at Bristol, I was like, oh my god, Twitter's gonna go crazy.
Yeah.
Because
And then
someone told me about a week ago, and they were like, oh yeah, Kyle missed the shift at Darlington, but they kind of covered that up until they had to say it. So the reason I was not partaking in that tinfoil hat is because someone told me a week ago that he'd missed a shift, and then I posted a picture of like, well, he left because of contract disputes. They couldn't agree. It wasn't either side's fault. They just couldn't agree. But the people on Twitter took that as, this is proof. This is proof they're sabotaging him. And I'm like, that's not what they're trying to say.
I think Toyota values Kyle Busch a lot more than Joe Gibbs does. And I've already said that. You saw my recap last week. Since I wasn't going to be on the show, I said what I said about the RCR deal. But yeah, I don't think it was that much of an issue.
Yeah,
but what I do think that there is an issue that we have with the Toyotas. Obviously, 3 of their cars had power steering issues. So Nathan, I kind of want to let you take the lead on this one and kind of figure out, do you think this is just Toyota got a bad or JGR got a bad batch, or is this a Toyota setup thing?
Oh man, this is tough. I feel like all the teams are adapting to this thing at the same time, and parts are going to be faulty. But I do think that Toyota has had a history of reliability problems. You look at 2008, Kyle Busch was the title favorite. He blew 3 engines in the first 3 weeks. He was done. You look at, I think 2009, Hamlin was probably the second fastest car in the chase behind the 48, but he had a bunch of engine failures take him out. You can go back so many years and look at all these Toyota issues. And of course, I think that this year is different because there's single source parts. Everything is coming from somebody else. But I do think that it's part of it. Some teams are going to do better with that stuff than others. And, being a JGR fan for as long as I have because of Hamlin, I've kind of been no stranger to these reliability issues. At this point, I'm just waiting for whatever issue is going to hit the 11 because he's due. He has not had a mechanical issue on the car since, I think, Vegas, which he lost power steering in. So
let's hope that it's not until the round
he's
of,
due. Like something's going to happen. I mean, he's blown engines in the playoffs. He's had roof hatches come off. He's had his dashboard cut out in the middle of a race. I mean, Something's
Yeah.
going to happen to the other two Toyotas. I just don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it was probably something to do with how aggressive their setup was, but I can also say that to the Fords. I'm not going to be one
Oh,
of these
yeah.
guys that have a Goodyear conspiracy for the Bristol night race. I hate Goodyear. I've said that plenty of times, but I don't think this was a Goodyear issue. So I'll say that the tires were a very, very big problem on Saturday night, but I don't think that it was a Goodyear issue because it was a mostly Ford issue. Now, I want to start by saying that most of these Ford cars probably have similar, suspension setups and whatever. And you don't have practice time to change your suspension out like you should. That's one of the things that Brad Keselowski is like, we need 2 hours of practice each weekend. Give us time between sessions so that we can make vast changes, because the minute changes that we can make in 15, 20 seconds, or whatever. But in order to change a shock on these new cars, it's not a 5-minute process anymore. It's a 30, 45-minute process. So that's something that they probably could have even seen in practice, but not even touched, because post-qualifying, they can't touch the car. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what happened or what, because you can't in 20 minutes get a long enough run to run 100 laps in practice without.
Yeah, I think they just didn't. It was just one of those deals. I think 2311 said that they knew that tires were going to be an issue because of high load tracks. All the weight is just going to sit on the right front tire, and you can't really, if the tire is super hard, you're not going to feel it. It's just going to go. Like, it's going to blow out.
Yeah.
We've seen it happen to Indy to teams in the past, and it's just part of it. And I think that I'm sure now they're going to be super conservative on their setups, because whatever they did, it must have really upset the tires. I'm not an engineer, so I can't really say they did anything in particular, but it definitely from the outside looks like they did something a little bit different than everybody else.
Well, I mean, this has become such a manufacturer-driven sport now. I know it always has been, but now, especially over the last decade or so, has really been about manufacture. So Ford, whatever they did in terms of their suspension and how they wanted to load up their race cars, for the right front on several race cars to go out. Ryan Blaney, he had his issue. Brad Keselowski from the race lead had his issue. Eric Almirola, pole sitter, had an issue. Drivers who were fast, who were quick, and who had great speed all afternoon long, all evening long, for all of them to have issues from the same manufacturer, it says a lot. And then also back to the Toyota thing, I know that David Wilson was talking about the power steering issues, said that the loads that we've seen at Bristol were the most we had seen all season long. You're heading down into the turn with the fastest speeds that we've seen all year long in terms of probably G-force, I would say. Such tight corners. And a couple of the cars that came to the garage, the seals on power steering were just blown out.
Yeah.
And that's not something that you ever see. That is such a hard thing to do. So it really comes down to manufacturer reliability and the manufacturer dependence. I think that Ford needs to go back to the drawing board and look at what they did. Toyota needs to go look at the drawing board and see what they did. Chevrolet is sitting pretty right now, man. They've only had a handful of issues this year in terms of reliability. And as I'm looking at the stats right now, Chevrolet, they had 5 cars in the top 5 or the top 10. They were looking pretty darn stout. So, Chevrolet's got their stuff figured out.
I got to give a shout out to Chase Briscoe, because I don't think it blew off like it did everybody else, or else he would have got out of the race. But his power steering gradually went out from lap 4 onwards. So he basically ran like 496 laps without power steering.
Damn.
And he finished in the top 15.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
So you said stuff about the load and stuff. I think how do we miss this? I know, you mentioned, Nathan, that Toyota and 2311 knew that this was going to happen. I think most of us hardcore fans knew that this was going to happen, that there was going to be a lot more load on everything. But it was like we all had the Pikachu shock face on when we get there. And I noticed it on Saturday night when I was watching the race. I was like, Jesus Christ, these cars are flying. I don't think I've ever seen cars go around Bristol that fast. In
Yeah,
the
like
Cup
they might
Series.
not be fast in a straight line, but they were fast in the corners.
Yeah, and
Like
and
I
I
wonder
know
Dover
that.
too. Like I don't know if you
Yeah,
guys watched Dover, but like they weren't super fast in the straightaways, but man, they turned so fast. I
yeah,
mean,
They're
and we should
they
quick.
have
were
known better
like
though because
they
we had the
hardly slowed
550
down.
package, and
Yeah.
when we went to the 750 package from the the 850 package in 2015, we've seen these corner speeds go up every time we slow the cars down, and that leads to things like tire failures, like more wear on the tires, and
Yeah.
less passing and stuff. So I don't
They
understand
got
why
a
we're
ton of
here as a
downforce
sport.
too. So,
Yeah,
even if you reduce the power, you're still going into the corner super fast. And
yeah,
that
I don't
almost
understand.
for me it begs a question to how did they make tires not blow out every lap in 2014? Because obviously they had a ton of downforce for the time being. They didn't have a diffuser, they didn't have underbody aero, but they had a
But they
9-inch
were going
spoiler.
slower.
Yeah,
They were
they
going
had a
slower. That's why.
right. They were
Because
going
mid corner speed went up 15 mile an hour on average in
right.
2015 when we had the 750 package.
Yeah,
Because
it's just crazy to think about because
we were going
the
faster into the
spoiler
corner.
the
You had to
spoiler
brake.
the spoiler was the same height in 2015 as it was in 2014. So it almost makes you wonder. They go from 205 to 150 in the corner, as opposed to going from 180 in this car to 150 in the corner. So it's like I
Yeah.
don't I don't know how they didn't have more issues in the past.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at cars that are faster into the corner, they brake and they slow down mid corner. There's a lot less load. That's what it comes down to. Like we saw this weekend, they are like he said, 1/3 into the corner, they're jamming the throttle because they can handle it all the way around. Well, they couldn't handle it over 500 laps, but the biggest thing for me this weekend was the tire issues, not because they were happening, because shit happens. You
Right.
know, we expect that if a manufacturer misses a setup, a lot of people are going to have problems. What I was pissed off at is Keith. He noted the 10. He noted the 6. The 11 had an issue. 43, whatever. There were probably 8 or 9 guys that popped tires, and we
Oh
didn't
yeah,
get cautions except for 2 of them. And the 2 that we got
that
cautions
was
for was
I
the
think it was
20
Hamlin, right?
and the 43.
Hamlin got one.
Okay, well,
I think he did. I
I don't
think
know.
because I'm
Did
pretty
he hit
sure
the
like a
wall? Because
caution
I'm pretty
came out like
sure.
right after he had that thing happen.
I
I
think he
swore he
may
had a
have.
caution because like I
Did
was
he?
on the
No, he
onboard.
popped the tire after the caution came out.
No,
Like
I
his
think he blew
his.
a tire under green, and then like a straightaway later, like the caution lights were on. So I don't know
Yeah,
what caused it, but I feel like he warranted one because he was crawling.
yeah.
Like
But
he
the
pretty much
thing
came to a
is,
dead stop.
my point was, we saw cautions for the guys that didn't hit the wall.
Right.
I mean, the 43 and the 20 did not hit the wall, and they were fine. And then the 6,
The 2.
the 2, the 10, all these guys didn't get a caution, and they hit the wall. Like
It's
I
just
don't get it.
I don't know. I
What the
think I'm just
you
gonna
know?
say it's just NASCAR being NASCAR. Like you've seen it some time and time again where there's gonna be a blown tire in stage one that's a caution, and then you're gonna have a guy smack the wall with 5 laps to go and there's no caution. Like it makes no sense to me, but the guy I really feel for is Keselowski because he took the
He was
lead.
leading.
He had that race pretty much won because there was no more pit stops and he was driving away. And if there was a caution that came out, he probably would have stayed in the lead lap. And he probably would have still finished in the top 10. But because there wasn't, he got stuck in 13th for the rest of the night. So I really feel for him because, if you blow a tire from the lead, you should probably have a caution. And
Yeah.
especially if everybody else does, because if one tire blowout warrants a caution, then I think all of them should. Like you have to be consistent and fair to everyone. But I think NASCAR's motto has pretty much always been consistently inconsistent. So
Yeah.
it's just
So
some guys just get worse luck.
I'm trying to find what I said on Twitter. But I can't. I know I said that there was no definitive line because we didn't know when there was going to be a caution or not. But Mike Ford said, for what it's worth, not all wall slaps are created equal, never have, never will. The 20 had a 3-wide lap down, cars barreling down on it. The 6 was clear behind him because of big lead, easy for him to get down to safety. First of all, the 20 didn't hit the wall, okay? How is it two wall slaps are not created equal when they weren't wall slaps for the 20? The 6 hit the wall. Yeah, he came down, but he was leading. Like I don't.
I don't.
When the guy that's in control says some shit like this to cover his ass, it just makes me want to punch walls because it's infuriating.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, it's just a matter of
He doesn't even know what's hitting a wall or not when he says
they
the
have to
20 hits the
treat
wall.
every situation the same.
Yeah.
If one guy blowing a tire and hitting nothing is a caution, then so should all of them. Or vice versa. If this guy doesn't get a caution, then nobody does. It's like it's hard to really put it into words because you see it every year. Like it's every week, it's every year. There's 2 incidents in every race that are the same thing, and then one of them's a caution, and one of them isn't.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Do you have anything to add to that, Keith? Because I can probably rant for another 30 minutes.
No, man, it's just inconsistency's been NASCAR's game for the longest time, and it's just frustrating. There's been some I know that there have been a lot of strides towards being more consistent, which is great. But you can't pick and choose when you want to be consistent and when you don't want to be consistent.
Yeah.
I think when it's an incident that involves a leader, almost every time you're going to have to throw a caution. I think the leader having an incident shouldn't just, be like, oh, yeah, we got down fine. No, there should be a caution.
Yeah, I think I'd have been fine with the 6 not getting the caution thrown for him if the 20, the 11, and the 43 didn't. Especially the 43 and 20 because they didn't hit the wall.
Yeah.
If you're not going to throw ones for guys barreling down the wall after they hit, then just don't do it at all. And they did the same thing. I've been watching the 2010 season. They did the exact same thing in 2010 for the spring race, where you had guys that smacked the wall with 2 right side flat tires and they didn't call it. So I guess I shouldn't have expected anything more on Saturday night, but that is what it is. However, we do have the round of 12 going off. I do want to ask you guys one final question. And that is, who is your 4 out? We are going into the round of 8. The most important round is next. The wild card round is here. Who do you guys think survive Talladega and Oval?
I'm struggling for this one because the bottom 4 guys, they could realistically all win the Roval. They're all really good road racers. Chase Briscoe could probably win the Roval. Let's see. Daniel Suarez is 2 points out. He could definitely win the Roval because he is the second fastest car on road courses this season per lap time rankings. So he could easily win that race if he had to. Austin Cindric, he's been top 5 as well on road courses this season. Chase Briscoe hasn't really had the best car, but he's still, for the most part, been relevant on the road courses. So I think it's a matter of whichever one of those guys has a good Texas is definitely in the best spot because you can't predict anything at Talladega, Let's just say that all of them DNF at Talladega. It's going to come down to whichever one of those guys had the best Texas race. And I think Daniel Suarez is going to be that guy. I think he's not going to be one of those bottom 4 out because he finished top 5 in the All-Star race this spring. He finished top 10 at Texas last fall. I think that he could probably win the Roval too. So I don't have him in my bottom 4 out. I think, unfortunately, Chase Briscoe is probably out because I don't think they have the 1.5 mile speed. I don't think that they're good enough on road courses for him to be able to carry them to a win. He's going to come close, but I don't think he's going to carry them. And Austin Cindric's a big wild card for me because you've seen, I think, 3 Penske cars. All of them were in the top 5 at the All-Star race. So he could easily go out there and get a top 10 at Texas. I don't necessarily see him beating the JGR cars at Texas, but I think he could top 10 that race and he could top 10 the Roval. So I don't even know who's going to be out because there's so many guys that are below the cut line that are all very good at road courses. So I think that if anyone's out, it's going to be a surprise. It's going to be a William Byron. It's going to be a Hamlin. It's going to be I think Hamlin and Blaney, they're pretty tight on points. So if one of those guys has a bad week, they're done.
I think the first 4 out, Number 1 going to be Ross Chastain. I think he finally gets what he's coming.
Man.
I think he's got what he's got coming to him.
His
with the
tickets are getting cashed in. I'm 100% with you there, Keith.
I think number 2 is going to be Chase Briscoe. Number 3, I'm going to say, is going to be Alex Bowman. And number 4, I'm going to have to put Denny Hamlin.
That's a fair prediction. That's been on the back of my mind all year.
I think that you're going to see all the Penske drivers do really well at Talladega. Austin Cindric do well at the Roval.
Hamlin is like horrifically bad at the Roval. Like, you do not want to look up his record there. Like, you don't want to look it up.
I think Byron has a really good opportunity. And also, surprisingly, Austin Cindric finished 3rd at the All-Star race. So that is a good foreboding for him. So I think that's who I got. And on that note, I am going to have to dip because I do have work. It is quite the time. But I know for a fact I'll see you guys next week. And next week's race winner is going to be Kyle Larson. Bye-bye.
All right.
All right. Well, I guess I'll give you a win pick then, since he left us hanging. I guess I'm going to go with Christopher Bell. Shoot. Now that I say that, this is a tough one for me because I've been alternating between the 20 and the 22 all week long. But since I said it, I think I'm going to stick with the 20 because JGR has been really good on the 1.5 miles. I think that Texas being a clean air track is going to suit Penske very well. I think Logano could get track position, and if you give Logano the lead, he is not going to lose it because he's going to air block you. I mean, he's going to air block you until the cows come home. So I think I'm going Bell because I think that team is very good at not making mistakes.
So I don't think you're wrong that it's going to be a Toyota track. I think this is quintessential Kyle Busch territory for me. I think we're going to continue the streak of non-playoff drivers winning races.
This is something, yeah.
I think Kyle Busch is going to win. I think it's going to get redemption for those two losses. I think that the Roval, Martin Truex Jr. is going to win, and maybe we have another non-playoff driver at Talladega. I would love to see that happen.
I'm going to say this weekend, it's going to be a battle of execution between JGR and Penske. It's going to be the 22 versus the 20. Whoever gets ahead in the final pit cycle, that's winning the race. So that's my prediction for how this race is going to go.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's not too bad.
Yes, that's Texas.
It's 500 miles at Texas. I complained about people complaining about 500-mile races, and I got to push this point in before I get to my next 4 out. Y'all stole 100 miles from my Atlanta race because y'all complained too damn much.
Why can't we get 500 miles at, like, Homestead?
Shut up. Two dates. One of them has to be longer than the other one. And now we got two 400-mile races.
What we need to do, we could make Kansas, one of the Kansas races could be 500. Like, that'd be kind of cool.
I'm down.
Like, why do we need Texas to be 500 miles? Like, you pick the worst intermediate to be the longest.
I don't know. You know what? Give us 500 miles at Homestead, like you said first.
Yes, that would be.
Screw it. Let's do it. It's damn. Drew. I am not doing 500 miles at Bristol, but Drew did have another point I did want to get to. Let me. I never said my next 4 out. So Chase Briscoe, Alex Bowman, and then. I think Daniel Suarez is going to point his way in. I think Ross Chastain is definitely going to get – he's going to get cashed out on everything that he's owed this round. And I think there's going to be one guy that's going to have bad luck throughout this round of 8, but I don't think it's Denny Hamlin.
Really? Okay. You might pay for this
I'm going to say that William Byron is going to be the bad luck guy on this round.
That makes sense.
And I think that Alex Bowman is going to he and Alex Bowman are going to be out, and Austin Cindric is going to be in.
I feel like something that's been on my mind for like the past 5 months is that if Hamlin gets eliminated this round and Chastain doesn't, something's going to happen in Martinsville. Like that's going to happen because I think Hamlin is probably the main favorite that's most likely to get eliminated in this round because he's bad at the Roval. Yeah. And I think he ranks 21st on road courses this year. So that's a pretty concerning thing for me. So I don't
disagree with you, but I think he's probably going to come in clutch, and he's going to be the first playoff driver to win, and that's going to be at Talladega.
Ooh, that's gonna be pretty interesting. But I'm hoping for that because he has not finished a super speedway race clean since Talladega last fall, which was a rain delay. Outside of that, he has been wrecked every single time, and
Yeah.
it's just he's paying
But
his debts for the good luck
ones
he
that he
got.
finishes this, he's won the last.
He's paying his debts for the good luck.
Yeah.
I think something's gonna happen in Martinsville for sure between those two.
So we had one really good fan question
Ooh.
today from Drew. He says, "Okay, on Dega, is there any reason for the entire playoff list not to just ride in the back? Why would you not just hook up
This is
with
a fun
McLeod
one.
and ride?"
I
So
guess.
first of all, Drew, I know you're here because you're always participating. I do want to ask you, kind of precursor to what I'm going to say. I'll let Nathan go first. Have you watched the NASCAR playoffs before? Because and when did you start watching the NASCAR playoffs? Because that's going to kind of move around what my answer is going to be.
Yeah. I feel like my number one thing is that the points, I think 3rd through 12th, are separated by 14 points. So whoever goes out there and gets a bunch of stage points at Talladega, they're gonna be looking pretty good for the next week. So I feel like it puts everybody in a box to where they can't lay back. But what I do think is going to happen, there's going to be 11 to 12 guys all racing for stage points, and they're all going to crash trying to get stage points. And the one guy that lays back is probably going to profit off of everybody else. But at the same time, I can't blame them for racing for stage points because they have to do it. There's 14 points between them. There's not enough of a gap to where you could just sit back like Hamlin did one year because he was plus 50 or whatever.
So in the same vein, what I'm going to do is, first of all, Drew says that he's been watching since before the playoffs, been watching throughout the whole Chase era, 2004, whatever. Do you remember when Talladega was the round of 16 or round of 12 cutoff race and not the middle race? Because if you go back and you watch those races, we had 3 JGR cars in 2015, I believe. Maybe it was 2016, right around in the back all day. And Denny Hamlin was the only one up front racing Austin Dillon for that final cutoff spot. They don't do that because NASCAR moves the race to the middle of the round, and they can't afford to do that anymore. And like Nathan said, when you look at points right now, there's only one guy that might have a shoe in. He almost lost his chance to be into the round of 12, and that's Chase Elliott at 40 points. He's got a 15-point lead over second place Joe Logano. He can sit in the back. He's got 15 points to spare. That's two stage worth of points that he can lose. And he's good at road courses, and he's decent at mile and a halves. So he's pretty good this round. He's probably a good shoe-in for the round of 8, no question. But when you get to Joey Logano and you look at Joey Logano and you look at Austin Cindric, that's the first and last place from second and 12th place guys. They're separated by 19 points.
That's bigger than I thought, but
they can't afford to lose.
Yeah, I think Hamlin in particular has got to be the guy because he's so bad at the Charlotte Roval that if he isn't either locked in with a win or if he isn't plus, I think 50 is my number. If he is not plus 50, he's not safe at the Roval.
So Hamlin is tied with Bell and Blaney for 6th place, and they're at 30-13.
Hamlin's going to have to get stage points.
They're only 4 points above the cut line right now.
Yeah, they're going to have to go.
So that means 5 points separate the guys
they gotta
from
get
6
stage
to
points.
12.
Like if Hamlin does not, if he doesn't win one of the next 2 races, he's going to have to he's going to need at least 50-point cushion. Because I know at the Roval one year where he just ran around in the back because he didn't have to run that well. I think he was plus 47 was the number. So if he can get that number again, then he's safe. But that would require a lot because he'd have to win either one or both stages this week. He'd have to finish in the top 5, and he'd probably have to finish in the top 10 at Talladega.
Yeah. So Drew says, have a solid Texas right around at Dega and shoot for a mid-pack Roval. I think the only 2 guys that can do that are Chase Elliott and Joe Logano. If Joe Logano gets in trouble at Texas or the Roval, he's out. If Chase Elliott DNFs Talladega and then gets in trouble at Texas or the Roval, then he's out. So
Right.
I think nobody's safe if shit hits the fan at Talladega and they have a bad race at the other two. So these guys are going to have to play it conservative, but they're going to have to be very aggressively conservative.
Yeah, they're going to have to go for stage
Joe
points.
Logano or Chase Elliott.
I think what Chase Briscoe. Oh, go ahead.
You're looking at 7 points between 6th and 12th right now.
I think what Chase Briscoe said. He said that guys are going to eliminate themselves with mistakes. Yeah. So their only goal is to just don't fall too far below the cut line. And then at the Roval, whatever happens, which with how road courses at stages are with stage racing, the guy that's 10 points below the cut line could opt for a different strategy and just go for the stage wins. And that's 20 points right there. That's 20 positions on the track. So if you have a 10th place car at the Roval and you're not going to win the race, just go for the stages, do the opposite of everybody else, and you're plus 20. You've gained 20 points.
Let's look at a guy that can do something like that at a plate track. Who's well, I guess most of these guys are really good at the Roval. So let me go and say not one of the bottom 4, but Ryan Blaney. He's 5 points above the cutoff because he's tied for 6th. Mm-hmm. He's good at Texas, but if he has a bad round at Texas, he can easily go snag 18 points, finish 2nd, both of those stages, and sit pretty, and go for the win and not have to worry about having a bad points day. So these guys can set themselves up, but they're going to have to do it with being aggressive in stage 1 and 2 to even try to go for a win, because nobody's comfortable as of yet. And that changes drastically with what happens this weekend at Texas. So we'll just have to see. It's going to be an entertaining round. It's just because of the point spread and how small that is. But other than that, I think it's just going to be a standard. It's going to be the least racy of the 3 rounds, if that makes sense. But I think we pretty much got everything covered. I want to thank you guys for coming on. I know we got on a little bit late, and that, of course, meant that Keith had to go. His absolute max was 9 p.m., and he left at 9 p.m. I want to thank you guys for coming on for his first show, and, be looking forward to him coming next week because I'm not going to be here. So that leaves him and Colton and then Nathan if he's free. So I'm really looking forward to the future of FanFuel, having 4 solid guys plus Jared if he ever decides to show back up.
Yeah, so we've got us, and we've got a website. We've got everything right now is looking pretty good.
Yeah, everything's looking pretty good. As Nathan said, go check out that website, FanFuelMotorsports.com, FanFuel MSM on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, capital F, capital MSM, except for on Instagram, who doesn't use capital letters, which is just odd to me. And then also, if you have been watching the ticker at the bottom of the screen, we do have a FanFuel Pitbox Discord. You can go to the link on the bottom of the screen. It'll be scrolling by just a few seconds. It's been there all the time that we've been on. It's on there all the time that we stream every week. So just take a look at that and go towards that link and come hang out with us. We're using that for discussion between us during, races, but also to get your guys' input on what subject matters we want to do. Because, we're going to start getting into the off season and we'll be doing more subject-based shows rather than, what happened last weekend, what's happening next weekend. So we'll get back into that, the what-if type deals, stuff like that, history, stuff like that. And this can be really fun. We're always having fun here on FanFuel. We'd love for you to be a part of it. You can hop on the pit box with us, become a gas can over on our Discord. Other than that, these guys will see you next week at the same time, 7:30, and I will see you in 2 weeks. And other than that, thanks for stopping by. Welcome again to Keith Marek. Have fun at work tonight because I assume you're probably still watching. Other than that, have a good night, everyone. All right, bye.